Hello and welcome back everybody to the Foodbuild factory, where today we're going to take a look at Skullcrusher. That's the guy you can see on screen right now, and as always I'm going to show you some gameplay in the first part of the video, and in the second part of the video we're going to take a look at the perks, mutations, equipment and everything else. Now let's get right into it. What this character is going to be about is a pretty standard unarmed character, a full health one though, so we're not going to use low health, no bloody build here. And also my main goal here was to make a quite tanky character outside of power armor, and yeah, the DPS is quite okay here. Now there is obviously room for improvement, but I am generally very satisfied with how the build turned out, and other than that, it's definitely one of the more enjoyable builds I've played with in a while, simply because it feels very action-packed. Now, the whole playstyle really, yeah, it's on steroids actually. Like, it's really a lot of fun. Even though you're not the most powerful guy in the world, there's something about just punching mutated creatures and ghouls and so on with basically your bare fists. We're using Knuckles here. Junkies ones to be precise, and I went for the full heavy metal armor for the simple reason that I always, since Fallout 4, loved the visual aesthetics, and especially the one that comes from the arm. If you're looking at our weapon at the moment, you can see that in addition to our knuckles, there is this rusty kind of blade attached to the arms, which actually doesn't do a whole lot. It simply is there. It doesn't improve your unarmed damage or anything, but it sure looks nice. Now, the main thing about this build here was, as I said, to be relatively tanky. This works especially well against melee enemies, and pretty much when it comes to ghouls, we're mostly invincible. Now, if there were hordes of glowing ones, I guess they could wear us down simply because they can irradiate us too much, but well, in that case we probably just have to take a red away. By the way, I'm sorry if my character just looks up during the video every now and then, because something's odd with my controller. It's quite new, but still there seems to be a problem here. Now, this here is a situation where we might take quite a bit of damage. Super mutants, they can be tough, and yeah, they can be a little bit of a challenge, but as you can see here, as long as they are in relatively low numbers, there's no problem that we have. Okay, so he's over there. Another good thing about this character is I wanted to keep maintenance relatively low. Now, you will probably see me repair my knuckles relatively soon. I just realized now that I started the video that I forgot to do that. Okay, why are those guys hostiles? Oh, I didn't finish the main story here. Or didn't even start it on this character, to be quite honest. Just kill these guys. I really have to see, because I think I don't have any repair kits. Yeah, I don't. So, just off the top of my head, I think there's a... Yeah, there should be a weapons repair workbench at the Red Rocket Mega Stop, but yeah, we'll have to see if we can make it so far with our knuckles. I do have some backup weapons here, other unarmed weapons that we maybe want to use. Not even a bad idea, maybe. So yeah, let's just go through with it. Now, and the nice thing here is that we do have relatively high DPS. Now, one big thing is that every unarmed weapon, as long as it has swing speed, swings the same pace. Now, for me, the knuckles always felt like they do swing faster than other unarmed weapons, but that's just not the case. Data miners have found this out relatively early on in the game. Fast is fast, and there's no faster. So yeah, that's about it. We're not going to take on the Scorch Beast. I thought about it, but the thing is, we don't have any cripple perks, so I really would have to wait until the Scorch Beast is down, or lands on by itself, and also having a relatively low condition on the knuckles here, yeah, that could be a problem. The Knuckles are definitely one of the weapons that since the latest patch seem to be bugged a little bit when it comes to their condition. They're losing condition very fast. Like a few weeks ago they didn't lose any condition. To be honest, you could run around with them for weeks without repairing them. But somehow now they break very fast. The thing is, I still didn't alter my build to complement that because I think this is just a bug and will be changed soon. Now, back to the topic here. As you can see, we're bringing down enemies relatively fast. We might take multiple hits, but that's no problem. And another nice thing about this build is you just have to survive your individual encounters with enemies. And if you do that and don't need a stim pack in the process, if your health is low, don't worry. If you have gathered some reds, don't worry. You will see that your health as well as your health will come back, and all your reds will go away over time. This is what I meant with relatively low maintenance. Now, this character really is a lot of fun. You can see here, as soon as the fight's over, we survived it and we're back to full health here. So, very nice to see that. I have a slight suspicion that my weapons are going to break here, so let's go for a Mole Miner Gauntlet. It's not even modded out, so yeah, there's that. And this here could be a tough situation, but as long as our Assaultron here decides to go for melee attacks, we're in a good spot. Not a big problem. You see the Mole Miner Gauntlet is quite a bit more effective. I ultimately just went for the Knuckles because, yeah, I just wanted to have them. They're just a lot of fun in my opinions, even though they're definitely one of the weaker unarmed weapons. I think the only one weaker is the Meter. Don't quote me on that though, but yeah, you're definitely not on the most powerful side of things. Oh, we're not over encumbered yet, so here there should be a weapons workbench, isn't there? I really hope this doesn't drag out the video too long, because I really want to use the Knuckles for the rest of the video, and I ultimately don't want to restart. One should think that after such a long time playing this game I would remember things like that, but yeah. Guys, I'm sorry, I think we have to finish the video with the Mole Miner Gauntlet here. I just don't find any weapons workbench. Well, we're going to finish the ghouls until our until our Knuckles are broken, and then we're using the Mole Miner Gauntlet. I don't want to be bothered to search for the weapons workbench too long here. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter. It's an unarmed build. We're using Junkie's weaponry here. Not the ideal weaponry. Obviously, Bloodied would be working very well. Tier recently made a very good unarmed Bloodied character, so no need to show off something like that here. Other than that, yeah, there's not a whole lot that really works for melee weapons in my opinion. So vampires obviously would work very well, synergize with the whole build, being tanky and so on. But yeah, that's just a bit boring, and also should be pretty similar to a build I made about half a year ago, where I made an unarmed tank using a vampire swing speed power fist, I think it was. And yeah, anti-armor I show off relatively often, simply because I tend to find a lot of those weapons. Yeah, it still works obviously, but not the best. So ultimately, go for whatever you like here. Even Furious would work since we're doing quite fast attacks. However, yeah, Junkies, I guess it's one of the better options that you do have here. You could also go for multiple different versions. Having Knuckles for Zealots, Ghoul Slayers, Mutant Slayers, and so on would work very well, as the weapons themselves are very light. So there should be no problem in carrying multiple of them. We even reduced their weight by quite a bit due to perks. So yeah, Knuckles, you can carry like 20 of them and don't even notice. So as you can see here, we're having relatively low trouble. Now also, another good thing is that the armor we are wearing tends to have quite good condition. Now heavy metal armor really doesn't break down too fast, which is always a nice thing. Something that really bothers me when I'm playing with melee characters or tanks in general is that oftentimes you do have to repair your armor quite a lot, and that tends to be tedious, for me at least. So it's nice to have something that works relatively well in that department. Now, one thing we could do with this character is tone down tankiness a little bit and go for a more powerful approach. Mainly not using dodgy, for example, would leave us with way more action points for power attacks, but on this occasion I rather wanted to go for swing speed than power attacks, so as you can see here, that works relatively well. Power attacks obviously would boost our DPS by quite a bit, but I did want to have a more tanky approach. Quite simple. By the way, we're not using any buffs during this video, which is always something to keep an eye out for, because especially on melee and unarmed characters, buffs really make you way more powerful. Like, you should probably not use them all the time, or there's no need to, as you can see here, slaying mobs and so on. But it's something to keep in mind when it comes to fighting bosses. Definitely not something to overlook. And as you can see here, we just cleared the whole Huntersville exterior here without using a Stimpack, which is nice for a melee character, or unarmed to be more precise here. And yeah, that's basically what I wanted to go with here, because I tend to use quite a lot of Stimpaks on melee characters, and this time around I just didn't want to bother too much. Now, one place where I mostly don't get around using Stimpaks is the front yard of the Westside building, simply because there are so many super mutants, and yeah, since they often use ranged weaponry, which we're not as well protected against as melee attacks, we tend to take quite a lot of damage. For that situation, we do have the Born Survivor perk, or no, we don't have the Born Survivor perk, but we do have an auto-stim piece, so even if shit really hits the fan, we do definitely have something to back us up. But yeah, that's just kind of a fail-safe, which I often like to have in my builds. And most of the time though, we're just brawling through enemies without really caring about our health pool. Could have taken those Stimpaks, but yeah, I'm not gonna bother now. These kind of enemies can be tough, like the high fire rate Blood Eagles, they can definitely do some serious damage. Now, we are way better protected against ballistic damage than energy damage, so yeah, that was a good thing here in this fight. With a Gatling Plasma or laser, we may have seen a bit more of a problem, but ultimately, yeah, went down pretty easy. And yet again, as you can see, finished the fight, and we're back to full health with no problem. And we're not using a whole lot of chems here, so the healing factor mutation doesn't really hurt us. Now, one other thing I want to say right now is when we're going to take a look at the mutations, you will see that I currently have no debuffs from the grounded mutation. That's simply because I just, before I started the video, I used the serum in order to gain the mutation. The thing is though that the negative from the grounded mutation is that we do less energy damage, and we're not using any energy damage at all, so yeah, I ultimately thought I didn't need to wait for an hour in order to show you how the build would be if there was the debuff. Quite simple. Now, one thing you notice is we have relatively low agility or action points, simply because we're running out of them quite easily, but I think that's not really a problem with this character here. Ultimately, it's definitely a lot of fun, feels action-packed. I'm not quite sure if that comes off right in the video. Maybe something that you can't really feel unless you're playing it yourself, but you just have to trust me on that. It's definitely one of the more fun builds I played in a while. I'm enjoying it a lot. The aesthetic, obviously, I do like a lot too, but yeah, you can go for whatever you like here. It's bit of a shame. I really wanted to finish the video with the knuckles, but yeah, that's just an oversight of me, and I really don't want to re-record the video because it will be a pain to get all of the enemies to respawn. Now, one thing we didn't really show off during the video, simply because, as I said, I didn't want to wait for the Scorch Beast to land, is how we do against tankier enemies. And the answer is quite simple. We're not going to break any records for killing time, but I did fight quite a few Scorch Beasts, and it was no problem at all. Now, one of the main factors for our tankiness is the Ghoulish perk, which works very well when you are near Scorch Beasts, since they do give off radiation and heal you in the process, so you're very tanky when fighting such enemies, especially if you are near a fissure site. Here we saw the Stimpack activate, by the way. Bit of a shame because there's only one enemy left here, so... but yeah, that's it. And yeah, ultimately you can take them down relatively quickly as soon as they are on the ground. Now also, Sheep Squatches, for example, they take quite a long time simply because their health pool is so large, but yeah, they're not a big threat, to be honest. Okay, now we have time to even show off another weapon. The meat hook works with the aesthetic pretty well. Okay, we have 2 more enemies here. Maybe even start off with a power attack. By the way, this is not a swing speed version, but a power attack version. And one thing you can see, now that I'm letting him stand there, yeah, the bleeding effect from unarmed weapons definitely helps you quite a bit, especially if you are hitting them often, which we do with our swing speed versions of the weapons. And yeah. Anyways, that was it in terms of gameplay. I hope you did enjoy the video, guys, so far, and now we're going to take a look at the more in-depth information about the build, the mutations, perks, and so on. Now let's get right into it. First and foremost, we do have our effects here. We do have Alcohol Addiction, Colmex, Daddio, Medex, and Mentats addictions. I choose those to, most importantly, not debuff my strength, and then I try to avoid debuffing my endurance. That are our base stats, our most important ones. We want to be tanky through a lot of HP, and we want to have a lot of strength to do more damage. Now, agility is something, in a perfect world, I would have avoided to debuff my agility, because after all, it's helping us with tankiness, giving us the ability to do a power attack every now and then, but ultimately it wasn't all that important. Now, the rest here, charisma, perception, charisma again, that all doesn't really matter all that much. We do have -10 damage resistance from Medex, which is absolutely nothing in my opinion, and that's about it here. So one negative point in intelligence, but we're quite a dumb character anyway, so that's just something we have to live with. And as you see here, the grounded serum suppresses the negative mutation effects. As I said, that negative effect would be that we do deal less energy damage, but yeah, we're using purely ballistic damage anyways, so there's that. We are suffering from red worms, but that's not important here. And then to our mutations here. We do have Adrenal Reaction, which is universally decent. Now obviously on low health builds it's a must-have. On other builds, decide if you want to have it or not. Ultimately, I would have not included it if it wasn't there already, because yeah, we're trying to stay at high health most of the time anyways, but it doesn't really hurt us too much here. Bird Bones for extra agility makes up for a little bit of the debuffs we get from our addictions. Yet again, one mutation I wouldn't have included if it wasn't already there. Now we do have the Class Freak mutation perk, so our debuffs are way lower, so in all actuality we just suffer from -1 strength, which ultimately I still would have liked to avoid, but yeah, -1 strength is definitely something we can live with. Carnivore, I said it earlier, I didn't show off any buffs here, but obviously if you want to go for an unarmed or a melee character, Carnivore is very good, because a lot of the buffs you can do come from roasted meat from various animals. Think about Deathclaws, Yao Guai, Mutant Hounds, and so on. So relatively easily available buffs that help you out quite a bit. Electrically charged, not necessary in any way. I just like to see the effect go off every now and then, and doesn't really have any negative effect for us, so it's there. Grounded, this is a bit more important. Quite simple, 100 extra energy resistance. Yeah, we are in full metal armor, meaning that we have a preference for ballistic damage resistance, and grounded really helps us to even out the odds a little bit. We're still having more energy damage, ballistic resistance than energy resistance, but yeah, we're in a good place. Healing factor, usually something I say edit or don't edit. On this occasion, it really felt like it made the character to a certain degree. I said it during the video, it's quite nice to just finish most skirmishes with around half of your health left, and after the fight is finished, yeah, you're back to full health in no time at all. Really helps you feel like that kind of action hero in a way. So I really like to have the effect here, the mutation. Marsupial, very standard, more jump height, what should I say? Scaly skin, get a bit more damage and energy resistance for a cost of minus 12 AP, so not really anything to think about, in my opinion. Now, talents and twisted muscles, they are very obvious. They're boosting our damage, giving us additional bleed damage and the chance to cripple, which all work very well on unarmed characters. The chance to cripple is good because we're hitting quite often, so we have a lot of those chances. Bleed damage also stacks relatively nice with the amount of attacks we do bring off, simply because we have a lot of swing speed with relatively low base damage. So we're hitting enemies multiple times, and yeah, 2 times 25% extra damage. That's pretty straightforward here. And lastly, we do have unstable isotope, which is pretty much the same as electrically charged. No way necessary, but no real negative effects for us. So yeah, quite simple. Onto our equipment. Yeah, we have a bit more to show off this time. Junkie Swing Speed Mole Miner Gauntlet, which I used for half the video. This is the Junkie's Power Attack Damage Meat Hook I used at the end of the video. And this here was the main weapon I was planning to use and used at least in the first part of the video. I do like it a lot. It has the sharp modification, the Junkie Swing Speed Knuckles with less damage while power attacking. Really nice weapon, I really love it. The sharp modification, as far as I remember, does add yet another bit of bleeding damage, which synergizes very well with our talents mutation. And yeah, here it is. Now, in terms of armor, we are quite all over the place. We do have an autostim metal arm with more endurance and junk weight reduction. Now, the endurance is nice, it's something I wanted to keep an eye out for, but I think we just have 2 pieces with extra endurance, but ultimately nowadays they do work and give you more hit points, which is nice. So yeah, there's that. And we do have a chameleon leg, which we don't actually use in any capacity. I just put it on there because I had actually no other heavy metal left leg than this one, and before I decided to craft one, I just went for a chameleon piece, even though we don't use it. In terms of a chest piece, we do have a mutant's one, which gives a little bit more damage resistances, but, well, that's not really important. We do have another endurance effect here, though, and Sentinel, which we don't really use, but, yeah, ultimately, just a heavy metal chest piece. Then we do have Assassin Sentinel, right leg, so yet again, nothing really important here, it's just a heavy metal armor piece. And then we have one Vanguard piece, so giving us a bit more resistance when we are at full health. So ultimately, you see here, nothing out of the ordinary here. So there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of armor, being even more tanky, but I just felt like, yeah, there was no big use. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I do have the weighted mutation on the weighted modification on one arm, and I think I have the aerodynamic on the other arm. Weighted gives us a little bit more armor penetration. Aerodynamic power attacks cost a little bit less action points, but even then, not all that important. And our defenses look pretty great. Now, 500 damage resistance is a good bit above the diminishing returns, which are around 300 to 350 resistances. At that point, increasing your resistances doesn't do as much as it did before. but it still gives you a benefit, and going higher never hurts. And in terms of energy resistance, yeah, we could do a bit more here, but ultimately I felt like I was doing fine. And yeah, that's about it in terms of our equipment. Now one more thing to show off here probably. The shielded urban operative under armor, quite simple. 3 strength, 2 perception. We wanted to have extra strength here. Hands down the best under armor would be Secret Service. Under armor for extra strength and endurance, both boosted by 4, I think. I just don't have them on this character here, so yeah, we live with this here, but keep in mind, there's also room for improvement. Now let's take a look at our perks here. We do have 15 strength, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone here, and pretty straightforward when it comes to a unarmed approach. We have Martial Artist, Incisor, Blocker, Iron Fist, and Barbarian. Now, one of the main reasons why unarmed is so good compared to melee is that you have only 3 perk points that you spend for boosting your damage with Iron Fist here. That leaves you with quite a lot of room for things that boost your survivability. Barbarian gives us extra damage resistance when we're having high strength, which we do have, so that's nice to have here. Blocker is just a net reduction in terms of damage coming in from melee attacks, so very good, makes melee opponents very impotent. Incisor, armor penetration, pretty straightforward, improves our damage output, and Martial Artist improves our swing speed even further. Pretty straightforward stuff here. In terms of perception, we are at 1, and I used fire in the hole for the simple reason that, yeah, if I want to use a grenade, I can just throw that. The grenade does benefit from our Junkies effect as long as we have one of the weapons equipped, so you can just use them even though we're not spec'd into them. However, ultimately I would go for something like Glow Sight or maybe even Exterminator at rank 1, so go for whatever you like here, but there's nothing we really need when it comes to perception. Endurance is relatively high at 13 with Life Giver for extra health points, Ghoulish, which heals us a little bit when there's radiation affecting us, very nice, especially if you're fighting hordes of ghouls. Adamantium Skeleton, quite simple, we're always being attacked and we don't want to get crippled, that can severely mess with our capabilities on the battlefield, so yeah. Adamantium Skeleton, quite a must-have in my opinion here, and so is Fireproof. Universally a good perk, just reduces all the damage from explosions to basically nothing, rendering enemies like Scorch Beast or Super Mutant Suicide as basically useless. In terms of Charisma, I do have Lone Wanderer at rank 4, more tankiness, more AP refresh, quite straightforward. And then I have rank 1 of Tenderizer. Now, one thing I would aim for if I had more access to legendary perks is that I would like to increase Tenderizer to rank 3, obviously. Just more benefit, more damage output. We are basically always needing more than 1 hit to kill an enemy, so we see the effect go on off in pretty much every encounter we do have. So increasing Tenderizer would be one of my priorities going on with this character, but for the moment, rank 1 is enough. As I said, we're quite a dumb character, and when I say quite dumb, I mean like literally as dumb as it gets. We do have debuffs, and we have 1 agility, 1 intelligence, so we are at 1 intelligence. Meaning that gaining XP is a bit of a slow experience, however, I think nowadays you can afford to do something like that way easier, simply because if you want to go on a leveling spree, you can just have another build that you can activate with the punch card machine that has more intelligence. So you can just afford to do something like this. And the perk I used here is First Aid. Quite simple for if you only have 1 perk point available, I think First Aid is a nice little choice to give you a bit of a benefit here. As I said, sometimes we do need a stim pack, which we have our auto stim arm for, and if it goes off, it has a bit more potency, so yeah, there's that. But you can go obviously for whatever you like here. And then we do have agility at 14. Now, as I said, we have quite some debuffs to our agility, and the whole fact that we're using dodgy here makes us more tanky, but we're not really having a whole lot of agility to use a whole lot of action points during fights, so we're not using power attacks very often. But dodgy here really helps us being more tanky, and ultimately we don't need the action points all that much. Adrenaline, pretty straightforward, more damage when fights are going on. You can definitely notice it, and I pretty much always have it on melee characters especially. It's very worth it, so there's that. Adrenaline at rank 5, extra damage when fights go on. White Knight, quite simple. You may not think it's necessary if you have an access to a whole lot of repair kits or don't really bother with buying ballistic fiber. You can definitely live without it. But on this occasion I went for it simply because our intelligence is quite low, so we don't have access to the repaired good, fix it good perk, meaning if we're repairing our armor, we're just repairing it to 100% usually, and yeah, making repairs cheaper, quite a good idea here, and also reducing the speed that my armor breaks down, also nice to have. And lastly, we do have Action Boy, which is always a good perk here. And then we do have luck at 8. I use 3 points for Ricochet just to give us yet another bit of a boost to our survivability. It doesn't seem like a whole lot, but especially if you're fighting super mutants and so on, you definitely notice a difference having Ricochet or not having it. This is not one of the builds where there's a super nice synergy with Ricochet, like if you're using a vampire's weapon, for example. I'm pretty sure the bullets you Ricochet do benefit from your Junkies effect, but they don't do a whole lot of damage, so that doesn't really matter all that much. It's just for a bit more tankiness. Then we do have Class Freak. As you saw, we have quite an abundance of mutations, and you could live without Class Freak if you were to leave out um, some of the mutations, mainly Bird Bones, which gives you a -4 to strength, so that would be quite crippling if we don't have Class Freak. But yeah, I just went for it because we have a lot of mutations, and therefore I wanted to use it. And lastly, we do have Starch Genes. Quite simple, we want to keep our mutations and don't get any new ones. Now let's take a look at our legendary perks. They are quite a bit more exciting than usually. Most of the times I'm just using most of the legendary perks to boost some special stats, but on this occasion we do have collateral damage. Killing an enemy with a melee weapon, which our weapons are classified as, gives you a 10% chance for them to explode. You can boost it way up, I just didn't do so far, and that's nice if it happens. It's nothing that really makes a whole lot of difference in my opinion, but it's nice to have here, especially at higher ranks you really see it being more effective. Then we do have What Rats. At rank 2 is enough for me on this occasion. Obviously having it maxed out over time would be nice. It's just convenient. In no way necessary, in my opinion, but especially if you're fighting ghouls or so on, you're always getting a few rats here and there. And one of the nice things about this build, as I said, was that once an encounter ends, you're basically back to full health, which is partly due to the What Rats effect. Now, it wouldn't be a whole lot of use if we don't need a Stimpack, but then need Red Away instead in order to gain our full health back. So there's that. Legendary Strength at rank 5, quite obvious. This is my melee character. This is the first legendary perk I maxed out. It's just more damage overall, so it doesn't help us getting more perks as we are at 15 base strength anyways, but yeah, more strength, more damage, quite obvious here. I used one legendary luck just to give me the necessary points, but yeah, not a lot to say about this. Exploding Palm, this is probably the most important legendary perk for this year build. 10% chance to trigger an explosion with our unarmed attacks, and yeah, you can definitely see that if it happens, it definitely boosts your DPS by quite a bit. Maxing that out as soon as possible, definitely a good choice. It's just always going to benefit you. It also feels like it can happen way more than 10% of the time, but yeah, that's hard to verify. And lastly, we do have Funky Dots. Poison resistance. Now, it's not as important simply because we are a high health character, so we have time to react if we are poisoned. On the other side, I really love the tanky approach here, and doubling down on it rendering things like legendary Mirelurk Kings and so on a bit more useless. Especially if we're fighting Mirelurk Queens, it's a big help to have poison resistance going on. So yeah, we have that at rank 2. And that's basically it, guys. I hope you did enjoy the video. We're now going to take a look here so I can choose a good thumbnail later on. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the build. It really was fun for me. I really do like the way melee works nowadays. Obviously, I still would love to see it being buffed in terms of damage, but I think unarmed is still in a good place. It's definitely useful, especially for mobbing and so on. It's super good. And the only real problem I see is when you're fighting bosses as you're lacking DPS, but on the other side, you're quite tanky, so you can just afford to drag out fights, and ultimately you don't use a whole lot of Stimpaks, so if you are in a boss fight, you should have quite a good amount of Stimpaks ready to use in order to sustain your survivability during such a fight. I hope you enjoyed it, guys. See you next time. Bye.